Alright YouTube, I have a couple of online battles to show you. This is the first one. I'm playing as the Julii Romans. My opponent started out, he was going to play as Dacia, which I was excited about because it's a 10k game. Dacia would be a little better, and it would be a historic matchup between Rome and Dacia. And so I had brought an army kind of planning for that, but then he switched his army to Scipii, and so I changed my army a slight bit. I have an early legionary cohort out front to absorb archer and pillar fire. I've got 2 units of auxiliary light infantry, and then I have 5 units of legionary cohorts, and they are upgraded with bronze, and a chevron. I have 2 units of gold upgraded Roman cavalry. So I've tried to bring a semi-feasible Roman army. It's the only thing that's probably unfeasible about my Roman army is the amount of archers. However, the Romans could have hired a lot of archers if they wanted to. Anyway, because his archers, he left them on fire at will, so they fired at my early legionary cohort, so my archers get the first devastating volleys, and it pretty much destroys this archer force's ability to win this fight. And I think that he had 5 or 6 archers, the same as me. Looks like 6 units of archers. And he has 3 units of Praetorian Cav. One of them he's moving out to try and take my archer's attention with, and I'm not going to do that. He brought also, I believe, 6 units of legionary cohorts. So it was nice of my opponent to not bring, and he brought a Praetorian cohort for his general. So I like my opponent's army, except for the Praetorian Cav, but that's okay. Since he didn't bring urban cohorts, I'll tolerate the Praetorian Cav. But again, I'm using a tactic. A lot of you said that you'd like to see me use different tactics. This one isn't really different for me, but it's different for most online players. In real life, a lot of times cavalry was assisted by light infantry, and that was the purpose of me bringing this auxilia. The Numidians were especially good at assisting their cavalry with light infantry, and that's part of what made them so devastating. So you don't necessarily need to bring extra heavy cav if you can support properly with infantry. So my opponent sees that my line of early legionaries is going to give him problems for multiple reasons, and so he's kind of harassing them with his Praetorian Cav, and I turn my men around and he charges into my back while they're in loose formation. So I go ahead and put my men into a fight, and I don't really care if I lose them at this point. They've served their purpose very well. It would be nice had they been able to absorb a Pillar Storm for me, but oh well. So I'll just kill as many of his Praetorians as I can. And as soon as my legionaries died, I realized that I probably should have been pouring archer fire in there, so I retasked my archers. You can see that I've completely devastated his 6 units of archers. There's a couple of his men left on his left flank. So I retask onto his Praetorian Cav, and I score a few kills while his men are retreating. I need to reduce his cavalry as much as possible, because even though my Roman cavalry is upgraded much better than his Praetorians are obviously better. I think my opponent brought a fairly smart army for online play. He brought a lot of archers, which is usually a good tactic. It's just that he would have fared a lot better had he not left his archers on fire at will, where mine were able to get advantage of him. Now here he's kind of forced to move up his troops, or else I'm going to just sit there and rake him with archer fire. And so I get the first pillar throw, which is also going to be decisive. And you'll notice that my units are not in one contiguous line. I do that a lot when I play as Rome, and that kind of creates gaps and confusion for your opponent. So my opponent goes wide to the flanks with his Praetorians, you can see that there, and on this flank. And I kind of keep my auxilia pointed in their direction, and my auxilia are going to be used just kind of to slow my opponent's cavalry advance, because now that I have an infantry advantage, I'm going to push that advantage. And here my opponent's cavalry gets blocked by my auxilia, so I'm going to take my Roman cavalry around and start some hammer and anvil work. Now, my opponent's infantry line is stronger on his left flank, and my infantry line is stronger on my right flank. So his cavalry got too far out, like I said, so that's why I'm moving mine back to protect from his hammer and anvils, and I'm going to be the one to get the first blow. And so here I knock out his right flank, and so that's going to be very bad for my opponent, but the battle isn't over yet, and he's going to keep playing. Here he drives in a hammer and anvil on my troops in the center, but fortunately his troops had just routed, and so it kind of blunted his attack a little bit. And so he's going to go ahead and pour in the remainder of his cavalry onto this legionary cohort here. But now he's kind of in a bad position. My auxilia are moving in to surround his cavalry, and my cavalry are hitting his from behind. He's got troops that are routing. I have archers left. So my opponent's really now in bad shape. He made a good scramble there to try and turn the battle back to his favor, but it just didn't work because his troops routed at the wrong moment for him there. Yep, so here's his troops valiantly fighting to the end, and Roman troops will do that a lot. And over here I think I left my cavalry in a melee fight, which probably wasn't too smart. But I have my archers assisting and stuff, so they're able to continue to do some damage. And I go ahead and pull my Roman cavalry out of here, and I'm going to set them up for another charge. Roman cavalry are considered heavy cavalry, but they're actually quite light for heavy cavalry. So here I drive in an attack, get some of his men, and eventually we're going to cause this unit of legionary cohort to rout. You can see I still have some legionary cohorts there fighting as well. My opponent's general unit just routed, you can see that in the background, and I think eventually here I kill his general, and that also just kind of puts the nail in the coffin for my opponent. Here's anyway, I'm going to drive in another attack there that finally routs his legionary cohorts. And now my opponent's troops are in full retreat. So my opponent played well. It's just he should have controlled his archers a little more specifically, and I think that this fight could have been a lot more close. Anyway, there's my opponent's name. I don't know if he's part of a clan or what. Kind of looks like it, but then again, sometimes people just put a lot of little modifiers on the outside of their name. And you can see the number of kills we had there. Good game to my opponent. Enjoyed that. The second battle that I wanted to show you YouTube. It is taking place on the Gallic countryside map. I really like this map. It's mostly flat, has a little bit of terrain though, and some trees for hiding spots. I think it's a great map that still presents mostly fair terrain, and but also creates a little bit of tactical situations. Here you can see that I'm playing as the Numidians. I really like the Numidians. They're a cool faction. Their archers are especially cool looking. But their infantry is incredibly weak, so you have to use their strengths, which are missile troops, and their camel troops. And of course they have the Numidian Jav Cav, which can be very effective in certain situations as well. So let's take a look at my army. I have 6 units, and this battle and my previous one were fought at 10k. And this particular battle was not CWB rules, but I think my army is according to it. I have 6 units of Numidian Legionnaires, I think bronze, and a chevron. And that's to try and keep them in the fight, and you'll also know that I'm fighting them in very thick ranks. I'm expecting bull warriors on the field, so I need to keep them in thick ranks so that they don't chain rout quickly. I've got 4 units of camel riders, and then a general's bodyguard. If you bring camel riders and a general's bodyguard, that really makes a Numidian cavalry force a force to be reckoned with, especially if you're in the desert. And also if you bring Numidian Jav Cav, it makes your cavalry even more dangerous. A lot of people think that heavy cavalry wins against everything. That's not always true. The camels have a frightening effect on horses, and that was also a realistic thing. So, as much as I give Rome Total War a hard time about not being realistic, it actually has a lot of things that are realistic, and that's one of the reasons why I like this game so much. Now, my opponent brought a small army, and he focused it on his bull warriors, which is probably a pretty intelligent move. He's counting on them being tough. But his problem is he didn't bring any missile troops, and Numidia is known for their missile units, and the Spanish troops, albeit these bull warriors are very strong, they are somewhat vulnerable to missiles. They have a lot higher attack than they do defense, and so it probably was not a good idea for him to come without missile troops. And then also his long shield cavalry is pretty good, but it's going to be no match for my camel riders. He's also brought a general's bodyguard, which I would say was definitely a good idea. You probably wasted a little too much money on upgrades on it though. But to bring a general's bodyguard with Spain is very smart, because if your general dies when you're Spain, then your army is just screwed. And so to bring the bodyguard unit that has 2 hit points is definitely an intelligent move, because it'll keep his general safer. Now, let me show you my tactics. Someone said they want to see me use different tactics. Well, with Numidia you can do this. I left all my missile troops right in the center, because I want my opponent to charge his cavalry there and then get eaten up by my camels and my general's bodyguard, and I move my infantry to this flank, and that way I'll be able to surround and outmaneuver his infantry. So this tactic does somewhat kind of confuse my opponent. He's not sure what to do, so he's going to want to rush his bull warriors in quickly. That's understandable. So I have all of my my Numidian legionnaires throwing their pilla, and here to help turn the favor, he's also going to charge his horsemen into my Numidian legionnaires, which is probably not a bad gamble, because Numidian legionnaires really aren't that tough. And here he did manage to rout one of my units of camel riders. That's because they were isolated. Then I have 2 more units down here with my general that easily routed some of his long shield cavalry. And I also have my missiles now firing at his cavalry, so his cavalry is done for. They're too isolated. And a lot of times it seems like a juicy target for cavalry to charge into missiles like that. But that was kind of the trap that I had set for him, because I knew his troops would get down here and then get eaten alive by my camels and missiles. So there you can see his general is going to end up routing. Let's go back to the infantry fight. His bull warriors are incredibly tough, but they're also outnumbered. and I have archer fire pouring into them. So it's keeping the fight to where my men have a chance, and then plus here's my general's bodyguard landing a hammer and anvil blow. You can see the missiles flying in, and the horses in the rear. The Spaniards just aren't going to be able to stand their ground, and as always, when one Spanish unit routs, they all rout. Spain typically had cool troops in history. It's just unfortunate on this game that they're so misrepresented, because they really ought to be a faction to be reckoned with. They had fantastic cavalry and fantastic infantry, and then the Romans got most of their weapon ideas from the Spaniards, such as the Scutum shield, the Pilla, and the Cantabrian circle came from Spain. They really had a lot of fantastic warfare ideas and tactics, and the Romans copied many of them and improved them to a great deal of success. So my opponent's troops are routing, and I'm basically just chasing them down to make sure they don't get a chance to regroup. You can see in this battle, my opponent's biggest mistakes, like I said, was he didn't bring any missile troops. If he would have brought a crap load of slingers or something, and again, and a lot of you might say, oh, he was camping on that hill. I don't care. He was playing as Spain, and he didn't have any missile troops. He needed the advantage, and I was kind of glad that he played on the hill. I wish he would have brought some missile troops, and I think it would have really made this battle a whole lot more interesting. But nonetheless, good game to my opponent. It was brave of him to play as Spain, and it was kind of enjoyable. Spain and Numidia is a matchup that you don't get to see too often online. So I thought the battle was interesting. Here his regroup bull warriors are suffering the wrath of my archer fire. They're going to try and chuck a few Pilla. Here they go. I don't think that was too effective. And here comes the arrow fire. Spanish general's dead. And my opponent's only rules, he said, were to play fair and not give up. And so I have to give him credit for following his own rules. He did a good job and played a fun battle. So good game to my opponent, and we'll get the results here. And because of the situation there, that turned out to be a heroic victory for me. And good game to my opponent, Pandora tomorrow. I hope you all enjoyed that battle.